My name's Brie. I heard some people say hi, Brie. That's nice. Thank you. I am on staff here at Gracegate, and part of my role, or what I get to do, is doing all the fun, creative things. Woohoo! I'm usually up here doing creatives or working on different programs or events. I work a lot with the kids as well, which I love. I always just say my role's the fun one here. Today, it is my privilege to speak to you guys in this 4th week of our series on Who Do You Say I Am? We've been speaking and asking this question like, hey, who do you say Jesus is? Like, who is he to you? And we've looked so far. Can we remember? Let's make this interactive. It's more fun for me. What was our first week about? Jesus was the friend. Amazing. Second week, Walter spoke about Jesus, the teacher. Good. Okay, just checking there's not hints anywhere. And then last week we had Wes speak to us about Jesus, the healer. Awesome. And this week we're looking at Jesus in kind of a different role, something that's a little bit at odds with the other roles that we've seen so far, and that is Jesus the servant. Now, Jesus came right to this earth, we believe, to be the king, and the people at the time thought he's there to save us. So him coming and being a servant was unexpected. It wasn't what people thought they needed. And when I started looking at what to share with you guys for this message, I did what every good message preparer does, and I Googled the word servant, just to check, what it means. And this is what it said, and I'm not too happy about it. It says, a servant is documented as a person who performs duties for others, especially a person employed in a house for domestic duties. And I thought, oh my goodness, that's not what I want to do. I hate domestic duties. I'm lucky enough to have a husband who does most of them for me, which is great. He just makes me cook, and then he does the cleaning, the laundry, all the other things, like the fixing things. I don't know, it's very nice, isn't it? I'm lucky. But honestly, I'd not be a nice person if I had to do all the household duties. But lucky for us guys, don't worry, it's okay, because that's not the definition of servant that we're talking about today. We are speaking about this kind of servant, and it's defined, it was a little bit further down in the definition, a servant as a devoted or helpful follower or supporter. And this is the kind of servant that we are speaking about today. So throughout the Bible, Jesus, when he lived on earth, he showed us so many examples of this kind of servant, of being a devoted and helpful supporter. And do you know who he was a devoted and helpful supporter of? Of people, of the people around him. Because he went around and he was healing, he was teaching, he was caring, he was having conversations with people, he was sitting down with them and letting them know that they mattered. And you'd think that throughout this time, the guys who were closest to him, they would have picked up on this, right? They would have been like, okay, so this is how we act, this is what we do. But we're going to look at a couple of stories today where Jesus has to really spell it out for his main followers. There were 12 of them, his kind of closest friends, and they're usually known as his disciples. And so we're going to look at this first passage, which is in the book of Mark. And Jesus and the disciples have been journeying from town to town. Jesus has been teaching everywhere. He's been serving everywhere. And they're on their way to kind of their final stop for the day. And this is where we're going to pick up the story. It says, after they arrived at Capernaum and settled in a house, Jesus asked his disciples, what were you guys discussing out on the road? Obviously, they were having a big chats, on the way. And Jesus is like, guys, what were you talking about? But they didn't answer because they had been arguing about which of them was the greatest. They're just like, hey, actually, no, I'm closer to Jesus. No, did you see me? Did you see me heal that guy? Oh my goodness, did you not see me teach that crowd? My crowd was bigger than your crowd, honestly. They were just arguing over which one of them was the greatest. And Jesus says to them, he sat them down, called the 12 disciples over to him and said, whoever wants to be first must take last place and be the servant of everyone else. He's sharing with them, guys, I don't want you to argue about who is the best. That's not what we're about. I want you to put yourself below one another. I want you to be rather kind of lifting each other up, not to put yourself down, but to humble yourself. Unfortunately, the disciples, it takes them a while, and they didn't quite get it, because a chapter later, they're arguing again. And Jesus has to sit them down, and he speaks to them again. We see in Mark chapter 10. He shares, and he says, guys, you've observed how godless rulers throw their weight around, and that when people get a little bit of power, how quickly it goes to their heads. Have you guys seen that before? Someone gets a tiny bit of power, it goes to their heads. I feel like I remember that happening in school. It was like a privilege if you got to be the person that rang the bell. I went to school when ringing the bell was like a manual thing that a human had to do. That's sad. But the people who got to be the bell ringers, honestly, you should have seen them like strutting around the school. They thought they were so cool. We don't want to be like that, okay? We don't want that power to go to our heads. And then Jesus says, it's not going to be that way with you. Whoever wants to be great must become a servant. And he continues, he says, whoever wants to be first among you must be your slave. This is what the Son of Man has done. He says, this is what I'm doing. He came to serve, not to be served, and then to give his life in exchange for many who are held hostage. He's sharing again with them, guys. I came to serve, not to be served. I want you to be here to serve and not to be served. And the thing is, this is hard, right? Like it's backwards kind of thinking. It's not natural for us to put ourselves last instead of first. I know, especially when I'm hungry, I always put myself first. Putting ourselves at the bottom of the pack at a disadvantage is not normal for us. It's like this upside down way of thinking, right? And when I was thinking about this, I thought, man, serving is like handstands. And I was thinking about it. I was like, yeah, it's upside down, right? When you're doing handstands, you're like standing out. You're not the normal person in the room. And so I'm actually going to ask today for a couple of my friends, Byron and Ellie, they're going to come do some handstands for us. Yay! Well done. Welcome, guys. Now, just because, I don't know about you guys, but I'm like a visual person. Like, I need to see something for it to stick in my mind. So we thought we'll do some handstands. So, Ellie, you're going to start training your handstands for us today. Now, if I'm correct, you kind of do handstands for fun every now and then, but we're not like a everyday training kind of person. Yeah, yep, cool. So we're going to see if we can kick up into a handstand, okay? See how you go. Here we go. Nice, that's pretty good. Who reckons they could also do that? Oh, like 3 people? Great. Okay, we're going to kick up again. Go, we're going to do this. Oh, nice. All right, we're going to kick up, and I'm going to help you this time. Wonderful. Amazing. So I'm going to have my hand here. I'm going to help you find your balance, and we're going to see if we can hold it a tiny bit longer. Look at it go. That's pretty good, right? Yeah, well done. You see, with serving, like with handstands, some people find it more natural than others, right? Like, some of us might have done handstands when we were a kid and we found it pretty easy. Some of us might have never tried a handstand in our life because we're like, no, thank you, I'd like to stay the right way up. And it's okay. We can all start at different places, but the thing that I want to tell you, the point that I want to make today is that handstands take intentionality. So after just like 3 of them, Ellie was doing really well. But now we're going to have a look at Byron's handstands. And Byron has been training his handstands once a week for a couple years or so. Is that what you said before? 7 years. That's how long it takes, guys. All right, should I move this just in case? So Byron's going to pop up into a handstand for us. And let me know, guys, if you think you could hold a handstand for even this long. Like, this long is impressive. I definitely haven't got past this point in my life. He's got some great control there. Look at that. That's such a light little touchdown. Amazing. Thank you. You guys can both take a seat. Thank you for joining us. Pretty cool, right? And this is the thing, right? Byron's been training his handstands once a week, consistently. He's taken the time to be intentional about doing handstands. And let me tell you, I love a bit of handstanding myself. And during lockdown, I did a lot of them because there wasn't a lot else to do. And do you know what was cool? Is that the more that I did handstands, the more I saw opportunities for handstands. I'd be out on a walk and I'd see a rock somewhere and be like, hey, I actually could balance on that if I had my hands in the right spot, and I'd give it a go. Or I'd see a big, beautiful field and I thought, oh, what a spot for a handstand. I don't know, anyone else think those thoughts? Just me? Okay, cool, thanks. But the thing is, just like handstands, when we're intentional, when there's something, they are something that we put into kind of our daily or our weekly routine, I guess, we start to see opportunities for serving everywhere we go. It becomes a part of us. It becomes something that we kind of look to do, and we see it more easily and we can do it more naturally. And so this is our first point for today that I want you guys to remember. Serving is like handstands. Serving takes intentionality. It has to be intentional. And the crazy thing is, if we look at Jesus and how he served with his kind of upside down way of teaching and thinking, is he didn't just serve the people who are easy to serve, right? Like his friends, his disciples, his family. He served the people that it was hard to serve. He served the people that didn't deserve to be served. He served the people who were outcast and who were on kind of the fringe of society. And he got judged and looked down on for actually even hanging out with them. Just like that, we're being called to serve in this upside down way. Serving those around us who are sometimes hard to serve. That's going to lead us into our next point. And that is, know your why. Know your why. Know why you're serving. And we're going to kind of dig into this by looking at the next story. And I'm going to kind of paraphrase this story quickly for you, because Jesus is speaking again to his disciples, and they've now been asking him about, like, what's going to happen, Jesus, when you leave and we're just here by ourselves, and then what will happen when, at the end of the world? And, they were asking the big picture questions here. And so Jesus was telling them kind of in metaphors and illustrations and examples of what might happen. And one metaphor that he gave to them was about a master and 3 servants. And the story goes like this. The master gathers his 3 servants and he's like, guys, I'm going to go away for a while, like probably quite a long time. And he gives one servant, he gives him 5 bags of silver. The second one, he gives 2 bags of silver. And the last one, he gives 1 bag of silver. And it says in the Bible that he handed these out in proportion to their abilities, or he gave them what they could handle. So the master goes off on his long little trip, and the first servant who got the 5 bags, it says he goes out and he invests the money. He uses it and he works hard, and he actually makes double. He makes 10 bags of silver. Second servant does the same thing. He invests the money. He comes back with 4 bags of silver. Then the servant who got 1 bag, he was a little bit cautious. He was a little bit worried. He thought, hey, I don't want to disappoint the master. I don't want anyone to come and try to steal my money. I don't want to lose it. I don't want to do something dumb with it. So he dug a hole in the ground and he buried it. When the master finally came back, he gathered the servants together to see what they'd been up to in his absence. And the first servant said, look, I actually managed to double the amount of silver that you gave me. I was able to invest it and double it. And the master says, well done, my good and faithful servant. The second one, the same thing. He was able to double it. And again, the master says, well done, my good and faithful servant. The third servant digs up his money. And he comes along and he says, look, I didn't lose it. No one stole it. It's still here. It's nice and safe. And what do you think the master was going to say to this servant? He says, hey, this is not what I wanted for you. I wanted you to be able to invest, to make more from what I gave you. I didn't want you to hide it away. You could have at least put it in the bank and earned some interest on it, but you didn't even do that. You did less than the least. And it actually says at the end of the story that the master, he takes what that servant had, his 1 bag, and he gave it to the guy with 10 bags. And it says, to those who use well what they are given, even more will be given. But those who do nothing, even what little they have is taken away. And that's a pretty harsh truth to hear, right? And although this passage has got probably some sound financial investment advice, that's not what we're focusing on today. Because remember, this is a metaphor. This story is about what we've been given. What have you and I been given? Maybe time. Maybe it is money. Maybe it's a certain type of skill. Maybe it's the ability to teach. Maybe the ability to care in really practical ways. Maybe the ability to mentor and walk alongside someone else. We've all been given something. And so how are you using that? Are you investing it? Or are you digging a hole and burying it in the ground and keeping it to yourself? We're asked to not live cautiously and to use what we've been given for the kingdom. Jesus continues in this story, and the next couple of verses is what I really want us to focus on. And we're going to read them on the screen because it says, this is Jesus now speaking to the disciples again. That's where we are. And Jesus is saying, hey, when you guys actually, the end of time, you get to heaven and we're going to have this conversation. And Jesus says, it's going to be me that's going to say, for I was hungry and you fed me. I was thirsty and you gave me a drink. I was a stranger and you invited me into your home. I was naked and you gave me clothing. I was sick and you cared for me. I was in prison and you visited me. And the disciples, or the righteous, it says, these righteous ones would reply, Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you? Or when did we see you thirsty and give you something to drink? Or a stranger and show you hospitality? Or naked and give you clothing? When did we ever see you sick or in prison and visit you? And it continues, and the king will say, I tell you the truth. When you did it to one of the least of these, my brothers and sisters, you were doing it to me. Did you guys catch that? Jesus is literally saying, when we do these things, when we show hospitality, when we care, when we invite someone into our home, when we cook for someone, when we give away our clothes for someone in need, when we visit someone who's sick or in prison, he's saying, you actually are doing that to me. These people are an extension of Jesus. And when we serve, we're serving Jesus. That's a pretty powerful thought, right? What's just as powerful, and I thought this the other day, is that actually that's a pretty harsh reminder that when I choose to not serve, or when I say, oh, actually I'm too busy, oh, I don't have time, that's me choosing to not serve Jesus. Kind of like what Jamie shared in his reflective. It's pretty confronting when you think about, hey, I'm actually choosing to not do this. I want to read you guys this journal excerpt. It's a beautiful, beautiful picture of sharing Jesus with each other. And this is from a young woman called Jane. I think we've got a photo of her. You might recognize her. She also goes by the name Nightbird, and she's an artist, a singer, a writer, a creative, and she wrote and performed a song on American Idol a few years ago. And she became pretty famous for it, not just for her song, but for her character, for her story, for who she was. You see, Jane was exactly the same age as me, actually. She's 31 when she passed away. She was diagnosed in her late 20s with terminal cancer, and she fought the battle for a couple of years, and then, sadly, she passed away. And this journal excerpt that has been shared now, her family's been sharing some of her writing, and it's beautiful. Her family shared this, and this is what she wrote when she was in her darkest time, in the middle of her battle for her health and with cancer, but also part of her backstory is that when she was diagnosed with this cancer, her husband actually left her as well. So she's alone, she's sick, she's pretty broken. And this is what she writes. When I should have doubted God's nearness, there was proof too tangible to be denied. He wrote me notes in your handwriting with ink and paper. The packages came in the mail for months and they didn't stop. I was remembered. He made me dinner with your recipes and delivered it with your knock on the door. I opened his letters with my own hands and tasted his food with my own tongue. His gifts were left on my doorstep. God himself came near. Do not underestimate the power of small efforts of kindness. How powerful is that? In her darkest time, it was through her friends, her family, whoever she's writing about, it was through them serving her that she sensed, that she felt, that she knew without a doubt that God was with her. You see, when we serve, not only do we serve Jesus, but we are Jesus to those we serve. If you forget everything else, remember that. We are Jesus to those that we serve. And this is our why, right? We're speaking about knowing your why. That's our why. Because there's countless numbers of broken and hurting and unwell and lonely people in this world, in this community. And we are called to serve them. We're called to serve one another. I want to expand for a second on this knowing our why. Because in life, often our why, right, is like success. We want to be successful. And there's nothing wrong with it. It's a great thing. But I want to challenge our thinking for today to ask if we can change our why from success to significance. You see, success is about us. It's about kind of building up maybe our career, our finances, our health, our relationships, our hobbies. It's about building up our own kingdom. Significance, on the other hand, is about living a life for others. It's about using these things that we've been given, like we spoke about in the parable of the 3 servants, and using it to invest into others. It's about building up others. It's about building up God's kingdom instead of our own kingdom. Success is great. You can do a lot with it. But at the end of the day, it's probably not going to be the most fulfilling thing. But when we're living this life that is Jesus-focused, a life of significance, a life that's steered towards others, then we find that's fulfilling. We find that is life-giving. And we see it to be life-changing. And at the end of the day, that's when we're going to hear Jesus say, "Well done, my good and faithful servant." It's going to cost us. It's going to cost us. It might cost us time. It might cost us money. It might cost us sleep. But I want to ask you, what is the cost of not serving? What would have been the cost for Jane if no one served her in her darkest time? I know for myself, I was lucky enough to grow up in a really great church community and experience people serve me. I was able to experience being mentored and cared for, and people just have meaningful conversations with me and kind of, guide me in life. And that's part of my why today. I've seen the significance in that for my own life. And so now, how can I not live a significant life and look to serve others? Do you know your why? Are you investing in your own success? Or can we live for greater significance? Just to clarify, I'm not asking us to go so crazy with our serving that we're burning out, that we're striving and pushing and just killing ourselves trying to serve. Because remember, serving's not about you. Serving's about others. But it's a really easy thing to fall into, to make serving about success instead of significance, to make serving about filling your own needs. Maybe it's about people pleasing. Maybe it's about a need to be needed. Maybe it's about needing to help so that you feel wanted. Maybe it's about needing to feel worthy or needing to feel good enough, and that's not the kind of serving that I'm speaking about. And this is going to lead us into our third point today, which is surrender. Because when we serve, we need to come into it with open hands and open hearts to say, actually, this is about significance, not my own success. When we serve, no matter if it is the tiniest amount of time, the smallest amount of energy, or only a single shred of faith, God will use that. Nothing is too small for him to use in you, and it's worth something to him. So I encourage you, no matter what opportunity or moment that you're stepping in to serve, come at it with open hands. Offer it to God. To close today, I'm going to actually invite the band up now because I'm going to share a little story about a song with you guys. I'm going to sing this song after. This happened about 10 years ago, and I was sitting in church, and the lyrics of this song, I kid you not, they like spoke straight to my heart and gave me a bit of a slap in the face at the time, really. Now, this song was one that I'd heard heaps growing up. I actually didn't particularly like it. It wasn't a favourite. But that day, it really spoke to me. Now, I'll give you some context. So, the church had been speaking for a while about this mission trip to Cambodia. And if you haven't heard about a mission trip before, it's basically a fancy way of saying, we're going to go to a third world country and we're going to help. We're going to build a school, or we're going to build wells, or we're going to do something of significance for a village or a community over there. And I'd always loved the idea of going on a mission trip, right? I was like, woohoo, a trip with friends, we're going to a remote place, it's like an adventure. Like, I was all for that. However, this trip to Cambodia, I'd kind of considered it, but then what had cut through my considering was the cost to me at that time. I'd just graduated uni, and I'd started a little kind of dance company business, which basically meant I was broke. None of my friends were going on this trip, so I was like, oh, I'm not going to know anybody. I also thought, hey, the small amount of like savings that I did have squirreled away, I dreamed of going to Europe or to Canada or South America or Morocco. I had these grand plans of where I wanted to go, and I thought, actually, if I go to Cambodia, it's going to cost me my dreams of going to those places. So I listed my excuses to God, and I said, hey, sorry, God, like, timing's not right. I need to stay here and work on the dance business. I don't really have the money. It's going to cost me. None of my friends are going. And look, they don't really need me. There's other people going. They don't need me. And then the words of this song that cut through all of my excuses were this: heal my heart and make it clean. Open up my eyes to the things unseen. Show me how to love like you have loved me. Break my heart for what breaks yours. Everything I am for your kingdom's cause. And I remember sitting in church that day being like, oh, goodness. It really spoke to me, especially that line, break my heart for what breaks yours. And do you know what? God worked on my heart, and he taught me about surrender that day, because my heart did start to break for that village in Cambodia. And it turned my excuses and my thinking upside down, because rather than thinking, actually being concerned about the success of my dance company, I started to think, hey, maybe my skills and my experiences could have a significance on this village. Instead of worrying about the impact of my savings account, I thought, what is the impact my savings could have on this community? Instead of telling myself the timing's not right, I asked, how can I give up my time to make a difference? And I ended up going to Cambodia. I actually went twice in the 1 year because I really loved it. And do you know what? God was able to use all of these things that were my excuses to actually bring a whole bunch of good. You see, he was able to use my skills and my experiences kind of dancing and creating productions and events for me to be able to put on fundraisers that raised more than enough money that we needed. He was able to use my teaching experience to help teach the kids in that village about health and hygiene practices that actually was going to impact them to have a disease-free future. He was able to use my time and my energy to dig wells and to build chicken coops and to paint a preschool and put together a playground and to sit and to have conversations with the beautiful old women in the village and value them. Those trips to Cambodia made such a huge difference in my life. They taught me that actually there's so much going on if I just open my eyes and step out of my own little box. They taught me to serve with open hands and an open heart, and that God can use whatever you have. It's probably your excuses, and He'll use them to make a difference. This is important. This is the reason that we're speaking about serving today, is because, do you know what? There's still a need in that village in Cambodia. There's a need all around the world. There's a need in this nation, and there are needs in this community. And we rub shoulders every day with someone in need. So what are you going to choose? Are you going to choose a life of significance? Are you going to choose to live intentionally, to serve intentionally? Do you know your why? And will you surrender? Allow God to open your eyes to the things unseen. It's going to cost you, but it's going to cost you greater to not do anything. I'm going to ask you guys to stand, and we're going to finish with a prayer, and we're going to pray the words of this song. Yep, stand now. We're going to pray the words of this song together, and then the team is going to lead us in this song. And I just ask that, let's make this our surrender today. Let's pray. God, heal our hearts and make them clean. Open up our eyes to the things unseen. Show us how to love like you have loved us. Break our hearts for what breaks yours. May everything we are be for your kingdom's cause. Amen.